CEO of JCC MetroWest. What started off as just a little idea in 2017, our Women of Valor brunches have now, including today, raised over $300,000 for our amazing JCC. Therefore, in our room today, I would like to acknowledge some of the Women of Valor who are with us today from previous years. So if you could either stand or do one of these so we could all see you if you've been honored in the past as one of our Women of Valor. I see a few of you, so you can't hide, so just do one of these so we know you're out there. Karen, thank you very much. So I have a friend who runs an opera company. He tells me that people say to him, we don't understand opera. It's too complicated, it's too hard, I don't know what's going on. And he tells them very simply, opera is just singing stories. That's all it is. This year's Women of Valor's theme is Why the J? And the connection, so why the J is, it translates to the telling of many stories that happen every day, that are created really on a daily basis within our JCC. Today you will hear some of the stories from this year's Women of Valor. And also an amazing story, an intriguing story of a Jewish woman in the early 20th century jazz era by our author guest lecturer. In the meantime, we want to thank those of you for supporting us and being with us here today to support this year's Women of Valor. Now, talking about singing stories, here is our ECC director, Leslie Fleischman, and maestro, Bobby Becut, to welcome up to our stage the cutest singing storytellers I've seen. Leslie and Bobby, the stage is yours.
We're going to make some soup for Shabbat. Ready? Let's start with celery. So first we're going to chop celery. Can you chop it up?
I told someone he's going to get some decaf.
Oh, put the celery in the pot. Nice and hot. Get it ready for Shabbat. For Shabbat. What's next? What should we put in next? Oh, tomatoes, good idea. Should we chop them up? Let's chop them up. Chop, 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 chop. Put them in and stir it up. Put the tomatoes in the pot. Stir it up. Nice and hot. Get it ready for Shabbat. For Shabbat. What's next?
Oh, he's right here.
Strawberries. Oh, that sounds delicious. Let's chop them up. Ready? Chop, 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 chop. Put them in and stir it up. Put the strawberries in the pot. Stir it up. Nice and hot. Get it ready for Shabbat. For Shabbat. And we got one more thing. What's the last thing? Oh, onions always make me cry. Let's do it. Chop them up and cry like me. Ready? Oh, put the onions in the pot. Stir it up. Nice and hot. Get it ready for Shabbat. For Shabbat. Now we're going to do a song that's called Deep Inside My Heart. So everybody's going to make a heart like this. When you make your heart in and out. And first we need everybody give me a ooh. Maybe you all can give me a ooh. Ready? Oh, deep inside my heart, I got it. Everlasting love, it's shining like the sun. It radiates on everyone. And the more that I give, the more I've got to give. It's the way that I live, and it's what I'm living.
Well, to tell you the truth, we drew straws to see who has to follow that. Unfortunately for Rhonda, the short straw drawer, if anybody could follow that, it would be Rhonda Lilienthal, our Director of Jewish Life and Learning, who's here to give us a few words of time. Rhonda.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you all. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be able to share a few words of Torah with you today. We are in the Hebrew month of Kislev, and for our ancestors in ancient Israel, and for us today in the Northern Hemisphere, this is the darkest time of the year. When I leave work these days on my drive home, it's palpable. I can feel the darkness, and sometimes it feels a little bit scary. But I'm heartened to know that Hanukkah is coming to bring joy and light into our lives. And there's so much in the imagery of Hanukkah that makes me think of our honorees today. For example, do you know that the candles we will light each night of the holiday does not produce ordinary light, according to our tradition? It mirrors the holy light of the menorah that was lit in the temple in Jerusalem. And because it's holy, we may not use it for mundane things. So, just in case you're interested to know, you cannot read by your Hanukkah lights. And if the light goes out on the stove or something like that, you may not use that light to light something else in your home. That's why we have the 9th light on our menorah, the shamash, from Lehishtamesh, to use, the user candle. But what do we do if we don't have that candle? I don't know if you ever thought or worried about that. But in ancient Israel, that was something that the rabbis worried about. Thousands of years ago, there was a disagreement between two of our great sages, Rav and Shmuel, about what to do if we don't have a shamash. In those days, you couldn't run out to Walmart or CVS and pick up an extra wick. You had to find another way to light your menorah. But what if you had no other way? Could you use one of the other wicks to light another candle? Could you use the holy light? Rav said no. You may not diminish the holy light for any reason. But Shmuel disagreed. And Shmuel said that lighting the second candle with the first makes more light, not less. And his ruling became the law. And this ruling is why Hanukkah makes me think of our Women of Valor today. Because I've read your bios. I don't know how many people in this room have actually read your bios, because they're really, really long. But they're worth the effort, because they're filled with so many amazing ways in which you've used your holy light to spark others and to bring greater light into our community. And clearly, you burn brighter and stronger and are not diminished by your efforts. So Shmuel was right. May it continue to be so. May you go from strength to strength. Shabbat Shalom. Happy almost Hanukkah. And let's enjoy a wonderful program together. Thank you.
That was amazing. It's hard to follow it. Hi everyone, my name is Amelia Perlstein. I am the very proud board chair of JCC MetroWest. And I want to welcome you all to this wonderful event to celebrate three truly amazing women, and we can't thank you enough for supporting our J. You just heard participants in our program share their why. I want to share with you my why. The JCC for me is a home away from home, a place of community, friends, love, and as my youngest daughter Ellie says, it is her favorite place. It is truly my honor to introduce you to today's 2022 Women of Valor. When I mention your name, please come take a seat at the round table. Ruth Hutter. Ruth is active with the New Jersey Alzheimer's Association, Jewish Women's Foundation, and Friendship Circle, has served on the boards of the Essex County and New Jersey American Cancer Societies. She worked for several years as a tumor registrar at St. Barnabas Medical Center and had the opportunity to travel globally to cancer meetings with her husband when he was national president of the American Cancer Society. An active docent at the Newark Museum for 20 years, Ruth gave hundreds of museum tours. Grace's incredible career in early childhood at the JCC has spanned 40 years and touched thousands of children and families. A lifelong learner in early childhood education, Kaplan is grateful for the mentorship of 3 JCC early childhood directors under whom she has served as a teacher, assistant director, and now learning consultant. Grace was inspired by her mother, a Holocaust survivor, who taught her to appreciate life and instilled in her the importance of supporting local Jewish institutions. Next, Becca Fisher. Becca has touched hundreds of children and parents as a Camp Dini Reback unit leader, working with the counselors in her division and ensuring the daily safety, success, and happiness of all the campers. With a degree in hospitality and a professional career in hotel sales and catering management, Fisher has chaired many events and fundraisers as a member of the Women's Philanthropy Board. For many years at Adat Shalom, Fisher was active with the Religious School Education Committee and was involved with Inclusion Shabbats for adults with special needs. Each of you will receive this gift from the JCC, a menorah. With Hanukkah quickly approaching, we want to thank you for being true women of valor and for continuing to light the way for generations to come. Now I'd like to invite Katie Stralson up to moderate our roundtable discussion.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this Women of Valor. I am a stand-in this morning. Our moderator, Christine Strassman, unfortunately was unable to be with us, so we got this. I wanted to congratulate our moderators because each one of you truly means something special to me. All right, here we go. We're going to start off with a question. How were you all first introduced to JCC MetroWest? Ruth, you want to start?
Sure. First of all, I think it's hard for us to compete with that wonderful video you just showed. That was really amazing. Actually, I grew up in Yonkers, and the JCC was very much a part of my life. As a young girl, we went there all the time, and we went there on Sundays. We did all kinds of activities there. Gym and social clubs. And so when I moved to New Jersey in 1970, the first thing I did was to look for a JCC. And the first year we were here, my son took a teen travel tour with the JCC. And the rest is history, and I was always happy to see now that they're having social clubs. And I hope that all the mothers, young mothers, will bring their children to the JCC to join the social clubs, because that's really a major part of growing up.
We do.
Sure. The JCC was a part of my life in a different county. I grew up in Monmouth County, and it was always something that was integral to me. As a swimmer, I swam there. And when my husband and I relocated to this part of New Jersey back in 2009, we immediately went online and looked up where the JCC was to be involved. They happened to be having a holiday gift wrapping event at the JCC. It was right downstairs in like the atrium area. And that was our first moment of coming in and being welcomed here. The following year, I decided to chair it. I loved it, and it just felt right and it fit.
So before there was COVID, there was Hurricane Sandy. How does the JCC support a community facing uncertainty during these times? Grace, you want to start?
First of all, thank you all for being here. It's quite an honor, and it's amazing to sit up here and see all of you, so thank you. So it was really interesting. Sandy is a while ago, but it was an amazing thing to see the JCC as the hub of this community. And in such a dire time, they welcomed everyone in the community. And this was a place where we would sit in the cafe and people brought their computers because they didn't have electricity at home, and they sat there and they used their computers and they met other people and they used the showers because people didn't have running water. So it was really very fulfilling to see the JCC in another light. It wasn't that I was taking my children to the swimming pool, but it was that they were serving the community in a beautiful way.
Becky, you want to share a little bit about your experience during COVID?
Sure. Specifically, I think from the camp perspective.
Yeah.
So,
Not overall COVID experience.
I will say that one of the biggest silver linings to COVID was seeing the miraculous teamwork and energy and resilience within our leadership team at Camp Rebag. I'm getting like that great word, the pumped, because we literally like climbed mountains to do what we could do for these children. We were one of the only camps that was open. We took in campers from other camps that closed, and every single day these kids left happier than they came, even though they were masked, fully masked that first summer, the summer of 2020. It didn't matter. The social and emotional piece was achieved. They felt so good about themselves. They were hanging out with friends, because if you can remember, this was in the summer. 3 months prior, in March 13th to be exact, that was the last day of school for most of these children. And it was just amazing when you looked at from counselors all the way up to the leadership team and our amazing director, who I adore and is a friend of mine and is here today. We just did what we could to make sure that everyone felt happy. Was it exhausting? Yes, it was. But it didn't mean I didn't go back the next year. And I love that place, so I just want to say thank you.
Beautiful, thank you. So, Ruth, can you start off by letting us know what one of your favorite JCC moments or memories are?
Well, one of the most wonderful things, especially knowing the history of my family and what we've been through, is the Littman Center Memory Center. I think a lot of credit goes to that, and I want to thank my dear friend Annette Littman. Memory Center, which is so well used. And it's not only supported for the people who attended, but also for their families. And this is a very important part of this dreaded disease. But we're doing a wonderful job here at the J, and people come here and they're happy to be here, and it really is extremely rewarding. So thank you very much. And I hope you'll all come to the JCC and even stop in and see the Littman Memory Center. And the JCC has things for children all the way up to older adults.
Grace, you want to share your JCC memory or favorite moment?
So, when we moved here in 1974, because my friend Betty Andy, who's here today, she took us to a home and what we eventually bought, and we used the JCC for swimming and all kinds of activities, and I found out that there was a preschool here, and quickly enrolled my children, and Debby followed with her children, and it was a great time, and it was the beginning of their Jewish learning, and there was so much to be learned, and Phyllis Maggot, who was the director at the time, was an amazing role model and taught me a lot about family life.
You haven't left. Becca?
I think that the JCC has amazing programs and opportunities for everyone. Obviously, we saw all the different age ranges that it spans. But what I think is really important too is talking about the activities, the programming, the special events. I mean, I happen to live geographically pretty far from the J. I mean, unfortunately, I said this the whole time we were getting together and meeting. I don't get to, come every day and work out on a treadmill or, do something on a weekly basis. But what I do not miss I make sure of it. Even during COVID, I watch them from home, is the film festival. I think that the Jewish Film Festival is a phenomenal experience here, a great way to engage and hear new things, open your mind, and be exposed to wonderful programs. One of my good friends who's actually with me today, we saw a beautiful movie where the lead actress was actually here, Tova Fetchel, and it was Tova's Balcony, right? Golda's Balcony. And it was so special. And so a little plug for the film festival. It's a great thing that you won't miss, you shouldn't miss, and it's special to go see and take a friend. Make it a fun night.
Thanks for the plug. So this is a great question. Why is it important to support Jewish organizations in your community? Grace, we're going to start with you.
Yes. So, looking at my family, my parents were Holocaust survivors, and something that my mom always told us was, it's so important to support the Jewish organizations in your community, and so it was really important that I joined here, and actually even when my children didn't come here, I've always belonged here and felt that it was important to support the JCC.
Ruth?
Thank you. I know that people of all faiths belong to the JCC, but I firmly believe that all Jewish families should belong to the JCC. Even if you're not active, just becoming a member supports the philanthropy of the Jewish Community Center. And in our MetroWest area, we have many, many philanthropies. We do, and we have that help a lot of people in need. So if you get involved in at least one or two of the philanthropies for MetroWest. And remember, I know it's hard for young people today to volunteer because a lot of them are working, but volunteerism is part of my heart. I'm a perpetual volunteer, and I've volunteered at many things, and today I am still a volunteer at Friendship Circle, which is very, very rewarding. So keep up the good work, everyone.
It's beautiful. Becca?
How do I follow that up? Well, it's actually a good segue because I feel like people like Ruth and Grace and so many others that are out here, as well as friends that have become like mentors and matriarchs to me, if you will, that are not here, have paved the way and shown me what are really good choices to make and decisions to do, things to do. I think that my mom has always been someone that has shown me and told me how to give back, and it's always the giving that ends up making you feel like you've received more weight than gold. So I think that participating in events at the JCC and belonging to organizations like the JCC or Friendship Circle or Federation or your synagogue are integral to raising a community and children. I have my 4 kids with me today that will hopefully go on to college and marriage and their own families and understand the meaning and the power behind being Jewish and how special we are to be able to have this religion and this culture and faith, behind us and for us.
Each answer keeps getting better and better.
You trained us.
When you think of Israel, how does that make you feel, and why is it important to have a connection with Israel? Ruth, we're going to start with you.
Well, that's a good part of our family too. We've all been to Israel, and I think going to Israel is very exceptional. Remember, if we Jews don't support Israel, who's going to? It's a small country, but it's very economically sound, and it's really exciting. I've been there many times. The first time I was there, I was impressed because the bus driver was Jewish, the elevator man was Jewish, even the dogs understood Hebrew. But anyway, I always say that every time you go, there's something new and exciting in Israel. So even though I've been there many times, we went as a family for a week of Passover. It was very exciting. And my daughter-in-law and my son are very active in Israel Bonds, and they go a lot, and it's really, really exciting to go. And I think everyone should plan with their families to go at one time or another to Israel. So keep up the good work.
Grace? Becca? I'm a film
So if you can't go to Israel, what's the next best thing, right? It's getting an Israel experience here. And again, it's not my job. It's my pleasure to share that Camp Dini Rebag does that for all the kids. I know I sound like an infomercial, but I'm going to make it as real and genuine as possible. At this camp, like no other day camp, because I know sleepaways do it, they have an entire day that is called Israel Day. And at Israel Day, what the little kids do, as young as the preschoolers that you just saw here singing, all the way up to Gibo, which is, Giborim is our oldest kids before they become LITs, the leaders in training, they get to experience Israel firsthand here while in Flanders, New Jersey at our day camp. They get to taste Israel by the pita that we make. They get to feel Israel by walking around the shuk that we create and getting to, haggle and bargain and get their wares. They get to hear Israel by singing the songs, doing the dances. The Israel Scouts come. I mean, it is like, from soup to nuts, one of the most special days. People that work here at the J vie to come on that day because, I want to go to Israel Day. So yeah, I got to go to Israel for the first time in 2015 with a women's mission, and a lot of my girls are here, and it was an unbelievable experience. But I will say, for those that can't go, what's better than a camp that gets to give that to these kids?
Katie, that was not one of my questions, but I do want to add to that because I think it's really important that we do the same here in the preschool, and we're doing it to a younger crowd, and we do try to bring Israel. It's very important that Israel be a part of the preschool. And so we also have a day a week of encouraging the children to understand what Israel is all about. And we do try to bring it up at different times during the year when it's appropriate. And so Israel's also important here. And I just, as you were talking, it just came to my mind that I did go on a staff trip from the JCC, and it's really funny that Ronnie Weiner, who's not here today, but she went with me, and she would always bring her album, which is very old, of how we looked when we were younger, and bring it to her class and show them the pictures of when we did go on that trip to Israel.
Yes, my children have seen that album. I'm so glad we're videoing this. These are great marketing plugs. Thank you. All right, so we're going to bring it back to, personal. What are some of the things that you've done as a parent to instill Jewish values into your children? Grace, this is first.
So obviously, I had said this already, that my children came to preschool here, and that was the beginning of their Jewish education and mine. I mean, I was brought up in a Jewish home, but I learned so much here as a parent and then as a teacher. But I am proud to say, and I know that my mom would be so proud to know that our children do celebrate Shabbat at home, and their children have been bar mitzvahed. And I just have a really lovely story to tell about my grandson, Tyler, who wrote me a big congratulations this morning, which was adorable. So he's 12, and he is dyslexic. And children with these challenges find it sometimes difficult to go through the rigors of being bar mitzvahed. And my daughter, at the appropriate time, went to the temple and said that Tyler would really not be able to do all of the education that he would need to do because he has a lot of tutoring that he does and a lot of work. So the rabbi, and then later on, and so they decided not to go forward. And recently, Tyler, I think it was before the summer, Tyler said, "You know what, Mom, I really want to be bar mitzvah like my brother and sister." And so Lisa went to her synagogue in the city, and it happened that the rabbi and the cantor were the rabbi and the cantor that were there for her middle son Charlie's bar mitzvah. And they said, "It is not a problem. Tyler is going to be bar mitzvahed. We're going to figure out how to do that, how to help him so that he will be able to be a bar mitzvah. So this June, Tyler will be a bar mitzvah.
I was so immersed in her. Yes. Okay. I think my answer is just going to be pretty succinct. It's actions speak louder than words. And the actions that my husband and I, who's like my rock and truly like the person that is an equal partner in everything I do, I wouldn't be able to be called a woman of valor, which still is so surreal and like very, takes my breath away. Like when you literally called and asked me, I was like, wait, what, me? Like you're asking me? So Dave and I together, what we show our kids and how we model for them, you know, just even cooking together for the holidays, encouraging them to you know, try their best and then try a little harder because we know we can push them. And their involvement in Jewish things still just blows me away. You know, I don't need to brag about them and what they do. I'm proud of them. We are both so proud of them. But what's great is that they're just good Jewish people. They're kind and they're inclusive and they're looking out for others and they understand Tikkun Olam, and I think that's because of, you know, what they have seen over the years.
Ruth? First of all, I want to say, Becca, just looking at your children is such a pleasure because they're beaming and you did such a nice job telling us all about them. They really are glowing, so that was really nice. My family we always had Shabbat dinner. Even if my husband came home late, we waited, and we always enjoyed having Shabbat. They did go to preschool at our temple where we lived in New York. And now today, I encourage my children to be very philanthropic, and they are. And I also encourage them to support all their synagogues, which I think is very, very important, because financially the synagogues need it, and I think everyone should belong and take care of their needs. And I'm also encouraged them to, and I realized also that, thinking about it, that all my 9 grandchildren went to Jewish day schools through 8th grade. 3 of them continued even through high school. And Jessica's here today, who went to JCC preschool and then to Golda Academy. So thank you, Jessica, for being here. Unfortunately, the rest of my family is hoping to COVID. I couldn't be here. But I do want to tell you that I think that everyone should continue to be philanthropic, support the JCC and your synagogues. And it's been a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank Becca. It was nice meeting Becca and Grace, because we've been having fun together planning this. And thank you all for attending, because it's been a wonderful experience.
So the last question I'm going to ask our 2022 Women of Valor is, who are the women of valor in your life? Ruth, we're going to start that question with you.
Well, I think I have a lot of people who are in valor. So I look up to a lot of friends, I look up to my family. But when I think back, my grandmother, who was not a wealthy woman, but she was very interested in philanthropy. Every little bit she could do. Move up in her kitchen, and she did all other things. And she was a volunteer. I think she volunteered until her 80s. Maybe that, 90. That's maybe where I got my volunteerism from my grandmother, who raised 6 children and did such a wonderful job. And I really want to thank Katie, too, for planning this whole program, because it's really been exceptional. Thank you. Thank you.
I've spoken a little bit about her. My Woman of Valor is my mom. As I said, she was a Holocaust survivor, and her story is amazing. She taught me unbelievable values, which I hope that I have given to my children. The stories are amazing of her flight from Europe. They moved from Hamburg to Antwerp. My brother, my mother, and my father. My brother was 2 years old, and my father was called during the middle of the night and sent to a camp in France, and my mother was alone with my brother. And she fled over the Pyrenees. One story that my family is proud to tell all the time because she tried to keep it light, is that they were on a bus going over the Pyrenees, and they had no papers or anything, and the soldiers came on the bus, and the man sitting next to her realized that my brother only spoke French because he lived in Antwerp, and he put my brother on his lap and walked right past them, and who knows what had happened without that person to her. So it's such an amazing story, and even telling that little bit of the story, just always amazing to me how my parents were separated and were united in the United States, and I was born. So it's just a crazy story, but she did have great values, and a little tidbit, my family is all here. My sister-in-law Randy, my daughter-in-law Lori, my daughter Lisa, my niece Marissa, and we share a pre-Thanksgiving, which is in memory of her, and we all talk about her at that evening, and we're lucky to be able to be all together and have memories of her.
When I think back to my childhood, and it's the Women of Valor, it's such a big term. It's like, oh my gosh, like, who's your Woman of Valor? And Isha Kyle, right? You know, and like the prayer that's said. And so I'm stuck for words because I have so many, and I don't mean to say that because like, oh, I'm so lucky, I'm so blessed, but like, it's almost like jewels that you collect and put on a gorgeous necklace or a crown, or threads that you create a tapestry with, like whether it be a dear friend that has helped me along the way, whether it be my grandmother that, you know, I found out not until her unveiling that she converted to Judaism, but I always looked to her as being the person that we, you know, lit candles with on Shabbat and were there for Passover, and she was this tall, stately woman that you know, always, you know, had us over for, you know, meals and things like that. My Bubby, who's my mom's grandmother, who, you know, my mom has her candlesticks, and we, you know, always got together with her and her many siblings. And what I'm getting at is there's a lot of people that are very special to me that have helped to, I think, shape me and make me understand important decisions that I've wanted to make in my life, or choices that I wanted to take, and ideas that were great, and better ways to listen, and better ways to give. But of course, the number one person is my mom. My mom has always been the light that has been shining and guiding me to make my family as strong as it is today. There's times where we have disagreed. I mean, what mother and daughter doesn't? But she is the one that has shown me the power of community, and by her giving so much of herself to her sisterhood at her synagogue, and past president of Hadassah and Ort, I mean, it just blows me away, all the things that she was able to do, and I'm only able to know that now. Thank goodness I can tell her, and she's alive and I can share, because I have a family of my own. And I think when you, like they say, hindsight is 20/20, I didn't know as a kid like how much my mom sacrificed and what she did, driving us to preschool and like the challah dough rising in the car. Like she would literally make the challah, and then like the dough would be in a bowl with a, you know, cloth on top, and she'd go home, and then miraculously there would be challah at night, you know? And so all those like little things that like our parents do for us. My takeaway from this is, if you have a minute when you leave this and you have someone that you love that you think is special to you, don't text them, give them a call. Call them and tell them how special they are to you and how much they mean to you.
Before we finish, I just want to say, although my family couldn't be here, I'm proud to have my daughter-in-law here, and shout out to her because today's her birthday.
Happy birthday. Thank you for spending with us. Thank you. Ruth, Grace, Becca, it has been a pleasure spending this time with you. I knew some of you more than others before, but you truly are every bit worthy of the honor, Women of Valor. You're an inspiration to all of us for all that you've done in your lives for the greater MetroWest community. So thank you. Please help me congratulate our 2020.
I just wanted to say thank you, Katie. Katie is amazing.
I think it was meant to be. You did so well.
Good. See you again. I just started.
If everyone could take their seats in a minute, we have more of a program. Okay, one more time I'm going to congratulate our Women of Valor. I wasn't supposed to be here, so this is really part of my speech. So, if we could take our seats, please. We have an exciting part of the program. I would be remiss if I stood up here today and didn't answer the question, why the J?
Yes.
So, this is my J, this is my family's J. I have watched my children flourish and grow both at our Early Childhood Center and Camp Tenerife. I have watched them compete with Ruach at the Junior Maccabea Games, and I know as they continue to grow, there will always be a place for them here at our J. And now, it is an honor to introduce you to our keynote speaker. Debby Applegate is a historian whose first book, The Most Famous Man in America, the biography of Henry Ward Beecher, won the Pulitzer Prize for Biography and was a finalist for the Los Angeles Book Prize and the National Book Critics Circle Award for Biography, and was named one of the best books of the year by the New York Times Book Review, NPR's Fresh Air, the Washington Post, Seattle Times, Chicago Tribune, San Francisco Chronicle, and American Heritage Magazine. Her second book, Madam, the biography of Polly Adler, icon of the Jazz Age, was released by Doubleday in November 2021 and was a New York Times Editor's Choice for Best Books of 2021 and won a New York Society Library Book Award and an Earphones Award for Best Audiobooks of 2021. She holds a PhD in American Studies from Yale University and lives in New Haven, Connecticut with her husband, workplace writer Bruce Tolgan. Welcome, Debbie. Please join us.
I must say, I am deeply honored to be at this extraordinary institution, this extraordinary event, but I am a little embarrassed also to be here. You did not get a taste of what I'm about to speak about from that introduction, but I'm about to bring a rather scandalous woman to stand up here with your extraordinary honorees. And now I was worried enough about this contrast that I went to reread Proverbs 31, about the Women of Valor, to make sure that this was not entirely inappropriate. And in fact, I would say, except for the line about leading her husband down the path of evil, she fits entirely. She is just a topsy-turvy woman of valor, I have to say. Because with Polly Adler, a name who was once very famous, let's just say notorious, infamous, in the early 20th century, we are now entering perhaps the dark underbelly of Jewish American history. That's not how Polly herself would have liked to tell it. She preferred to cast herself as a modern Horatio Alger hero. As she put it in her memoir, a cynical person might say that my life has been a typical American success story, from the arrival at Ellis Island, up the ladder rung by rung, $5 a week, $10 a week, $100 a week, a mink coat, a better address, from a neighborhood trade to an international clientele, from a nobody to a legend. Now, there is some truth to that flattering self-portrait. Polly was, as maybe you have not yet discerned, was a madam. That is to say, we are not going to dwell on some of the details given the age of some of the people in the audience, but she ran what she liked to call a speakeasy with a harem. They were more than, I don't know, maybe some of you should cover your ears, but these places that she ran were more than oases of illicit sex. These brothels were impromptu salons of a sort, where the lowbrow and the highbrow happily mixed. As she put it, from the parlor of my house, I had a backstage three-way view. I could look into the underworld, the half-world, and the high. So slumming intellectuals, bohemians, newspaper reporters, all found her blunt realism and her wit to be a delight. Many in the underground gay community, both male and female, found her parlor a place where they could be themselves. Executives in the new fields of radio, motion pictures, and advertising employed her girls to woo clients. Wall Street traders passed along tips on the way to the bedroom. Racketeers, many of them in the Jewish underworld, used her place as a way to confer with politicians and judges where no one could watch them. Entertainers knew they had hit the big time when they could afford an evening at her house. And crooked cops of all sorts made her house their home away from home. And everyone, from Park Avenue aristocrats to Lower East Side bootleggers, appreciated her ironclad discretion. Now, if you had met Polly Adler on the street, she probably looked a little like your Boba. She was tiny, like many of the immigrants of that time, barely 5 feet tall when she was in her highest heels. She had a little Cupid doll face. Her jewelry was a little showy, and she had a weakness for mink coats, but no more so than any ambitious Manhattan woman of the time. Pearl, as she was named by her parents, was born in 1900, more or less, she was never quite sure, in a small shtetl in the Pale of Russia, in what is now Belarus. She was very much, if you're familiar with the stories of Shalom Aleichem, which of course inspired Fiddler on the Roof, she was like Tevye's daughters, a very clever, self-possessed and strong-willed, and eager to shake off the confines of her small village life and make something of herself. She was dying to get an education, extremely education-oriented, was extremely proud that she had studied with a rabbi in her youth. She wanted to be, if you might say, in the older sense of the word mensch, she wanted to be a mensch in the sense of a somebody. Her family supported her ambitions, which was very rare for a girl of that time. But, as the old Yiddish saying goes, man plans and God laughs. When Polly was 13 and studying to go to school in Pinsk, her father decides instead he's going to take the family to the golden land of America. But they don't have quite enough money to take the entire big family, so they decide they're going to send the family in installments. And Polly, as the oldest child, is going to be the first to go. She lands in Ellis Island in December of 1913 when she is just about 13 years old. Almost impossible to imagine, but it was not uncommon at that time. She was sent to stay with friends of her family, landsmen, not people she knew, but friends of her father's up in Springfield, Massachusetts. But then tragedy strikes. Before her parents can come join her, World War I breaks out. It cuts off all travel from Russia, leaves Polly stranded, living with strangers. She is forced to quit school. She takes a job in one of the paper factories. She's making $3 a week, working 6.5 days a week, 9-hour days. She is miserable and she is poor and lonely, like many young immigrants who came, Jewish immigrants who came thinking they were going to come and the streets would be paved with gold. What they discovered instead was they were working in factories, sweatshop factories. But she decides at the age of 15, she's going to try her luck in Brooklyn, New York, where she has some cousins who have lived. Now, she did not have any of that education she had wanted. She did not have much money. She did not have much of a home life. But what she had was freedom. She fell in love with Brooklyn. She fell in love with Coney Island and the promenade on Pitkin Avenue and the ragtime dance halls. She didn't know it then, but this would be the major turning point of her life. Now, there is a wise guy question that if you have probably all heard it, you may even have asked it. It is often asked with a little bit of a joking kind of leer. It is something that if you were in the sex trades, you have definitely been asked. And that question, of course, is, what's a nice girl like you doing in a place like this? Polly hated that question. She was always very cagey about how at the age of 19, she went from being a good Jewish girl to becoming eventually, very quickly, a madam. She did offer some explanations. There were, like there were for many young girls without mom, people sometimes make fun of the Jewish mother, but you know what? If you had a Jewish mother, things would have turned, if she'd had one, things would have turned out very differently for her. Someone to really watch over her and keep her safe. She did not have that. So when she is, again, I am sorry, when she's 17, she is date raped by her boss at the garment factory. She becomes pregnant when he refuses to marry her. She undergoes an illegal abortion. Then he fires her, and then she is kicked out of her house. All of these things were not entirely uncommon, but I still think it is very hard to understand her decision if you have not experienced that kind of hopelessness, that kind of poverty and loneliness, that kind of sense of powerlessness that so many girls at that time felt. So like many young women in her position, she decides that perhaps selling sex is going to be the way to survive. It will be the way, perhaps not just to survive, but to bring some kind of prosperity and some kind of control and power over her own life. It starts to seem almost like a sign of smarts that she can take care of herself in a world that clearly does not care much about her. So she opens her first brothel in 1920 in a two-room apartment across from Columbia University, right where Butler Library is. She did not talk about whether she did any market research, but it was an all-male school, and it turned out to be a really good plan. One of the things that is actually quite interesting, having just reread this proverb and having listened to these wonderful women, who I am not necessarily comparing her to, but what she came from was the tradition of the balabusta, the woman who could keep the house, go to the marketplace, make the goods, sell the goods. Like many women of this time, it was said in the shtetl, men were learners and women were earners, or more rudely, they would sometimes say, a boy stuffed with learning is worth more than a girl stuffed with banknotes. And so she had many of those skills. Her mother had been a classic balabusta. She could speak many languages, she could do math, she had a good head for business, but she also could keep a beautiful home. She was an excellent cook, a gracious host. Well, nobody would have told you that, but it turns out those are just exactly the traits you need to run a good brothel. So she's deciding she's only going to do it for a little while. She's just going to save enough money. She's going to open up a dress shop, and very quickly she does. Within 2 years, she has more than enough money to do that, so she opens up a dress shop on the Upper West Side. Well, she very quickly realizes, oh, legitimate business, the profit margins are so thin. She had gotten used to the massive profits that prostitution could provide. So this is an era in which white men usually made about, on average, $3,000 a year. White women, if you were out working in the workplace, would make about half of that. Polly, within her first year, is making $60,000 a year, which is about $1 million. And remember, she's 20 years old. She's making almost $1 million every year. And not just that, for the very first time in her life, she has power over her own circumstances. So she sells the dress shop in 1923. She goes back to the flesh trade. Now, this is another fateful turn in her history. She is taken up by the famous gambler and political fixer, a man named Arnold Rothstein. You may have, if you are a sports fan, you may have heard of him as the gambler who helped arrange to throw the 1919 Black Sox World Series. If you are a musical theater fan, Arnold Rothstein's secret floating crap games inspired the musical Guys and Dolls. If you watch Boardwalk Empire, he's a major character in it. So Rothstein is also sort of the godfather of the Jewish bootlegging industry, in fact, of Jewish criminal world, which was thriving at the time. He introduces her to all the big up-and-coming bootleggers, names that you probably know, like Meyer Lansky, Bugsy Siegel, Lucky Luciano, Lex Diamond. Polly's house quickly becomes the hot spot where all of the gamblers and the bootleggers like to gather at the end of the night to, blow off their ill-gotten gains. So all of this makes Polly more ambitious. It's how she puts it. I had always told my girls, if you have to be a prostitute, be a good one. Well, the same applied to me. If I had to be a madam, I would be a good madam. In fact, she said, I was determined to be the best goddamn madam in all America. A woman of valor in her own way. Because she can't advertise like a legitimate business, she had to find, there's no internet, she had to find other ways of bringing in business. She would take a posse of her most beautiful girls around from the nightclubs and speakeasies, and men would literally follow them from place to place and follow her home. She cultivates gossip columns like Walter Winchell, who was one of the most powerful newspapermen in America at the time. He becomes one of her oldest clients and best friends. Now, they didn't put her name into print, but they spread her name through word of mouth. And all of this works. She becomes a little like the Forrest Gump of the 1920s and 30s. She becomes deeply involved in the world of show business. She counts entertainers like Milton Berle, Desi Arnaz, Duke Ellington, Fats Waller, George Gershwin, dozens of Hollywood mockers as her friends and customers. She entertains many of the great athletes in this golden age of sports, including people like Jack Dempsey, the boxer, and Joe DiMaggio. Normally, I would tell a somewhat dirty story about Joe DiMaggio, but I will hold my fire on that one. I'm very aware of who's in the front row. So her problem becomes the hot, sorry, I should have been warned. Her problem becomes the hot after-hours clubhouse for all the adventurous writers, actors, and playwrights who gathered at the Algonquin Round Table, people like Dorothy Parker and Robert Benchley and George S. Kaufman. Their stamp of approval brings in the big money men, Madison Avenue, Park Avenue, Wall Street. She is soon counting genuine WASP aristocrats like Jock Whitney and Winthrop Rockefeller and the Vanderbilt boys as her friends and customers. But the bread and butter of her business are conventions and business meetings. As you might imagine, Midtown Manhattan is the center of a flourishing party girl industry, as they called it, that caters to all the expense account men and the businessmen. It's probably better that way. I'm still not going to be very dirty now. To grease the wheels of commerce. So Polly becomes New York's leading provider of professional party girls. So that was one of the shocks. There were many shocking things while working on this book, but how often business and sex were involved I'm sure there are still plenty of ways it is today, but nothing, I think, like it was in the old days. So Arnold Rothstein also introduces Polly to an army of crooked police and politicians, another big shock, for me at least. She became known for her generous bribes to the Vice Squad and her wild parties where gangsters mingled with politicians and judges. She counted New York's Playboy mayor, Jimmy Walker, as one of her close friends and most valued customers. So one critic sums up the charges against Polly this way. She provided a liaison between the underworld, politics, the professions, big business, and beautiful women. Judges' tips were bartered in her plush parlor, racketeers and labor bosses formulated deals there, police officers were broken or made, and candidates for public office gained or lost party support as a result of conferences held at Polly's place. Now here I'm going to stop, and I'm going to warn you again that we've come to what I would consider the most controversial point in Polly's story. So now, over the years, Polly would come to count some of the most powerful men in America among her customers, precisely because she was so good at keeping their secrets. But near the end of her life, when she is already suffering from the cancer that will kill her, and her health is beginning to fail, her mind has been dwelling on the past, she makes a shocking confession to a young friend who I interviewed later. According to this friend, Polly confessed that Franklin D. Roosevelt had been one of her clients around the time that he was running for governor of New York. She didn't say much about it, explain much about it, except to say that she was being taken care of for the rest of her life by the contributions of Democrats. I know this is New Jersey, this may not come as a shock to you. But I was very surprised. I had heard many rumors. I had never heard that. And in fact, I'll pause and just say, when we were listening to you talk about your mother and the role of women who came before, she brought over her entire family from Russia. She supported them, certainly her parents. Actually, her parents went to Israel for a while, which was a little bit of a relief, but decided to come back. But to the end, she was very close to her mother in particular. Her cousins would say that she would come to visit them in Brooklyn and for the Sabbath and would take off her beautiful clothes and scrub the floor of her mother's house. I think, and never wanted her mother to know any of this. Eventually, her mother does find out, and to the end of her days, part of why she tells this story out of the blue about FDR is her mother has just told her that she cannot come to the Seder because she'll, as Polly said, she'll take my money, but she won't have me at the holiday table, and which hurt her deeply to the end of her life. And I think so when she was saying the thing about FDR, when I asked the friend, well, what did she seem to be saying? He said, she seemed to be saying, don't you know, I know some of the most important people in the world, and yet I'm still being treated poorly by the people who love me most, which, as we know, happens. So you can imagine I looked into this claim deeply. It took a long time. I was never able to definitively prove it. I will say there was a lot of circumstantial evidence, and I think it is quite likely. And we, again, will not get into some of the reasoning for that, because this is not the time and place. But let me pause again. This sordid story is a good reminder that, as Polly would be the first to say, being a madam was not really a glamorous career to have. No matter how much money or power or celebrity involved, prostitution is a physically and mentally demanding business there. Alcoholism and drug addiction and physical abuse, diseases, suicide, all of them are occupational hazards. And for Polly, who was in this business for 25 years, she was always looking over her shoulder for crooked cops and blackmailers and customers who were going to be violent. And the amount of bribes she paid at least half of her income for her career or two in bribes to police and politicians. And worst of all, I think for her, was the hypocrisy. So many men of the greatest respect came and enjoyed her house, enjoyed her company, and then refused to acknowledge her in public. Sometimes it made her blood boil. But that was the secret to her success. Her ability to take it on the chin without squawking, then get back up with a smile on her face. As she once quipped, to an outsider, it might seem that I have got Polly Adler confused with Pollyanna. I can only say I am one of those people who just can't help getting a kick out of life, even if it's a kick in the teeth. So now this Pollyanna attitude is put to the test in the 1930s. The economic crash comes, the Depression sets in. All of a sudden the mood changes drastically. All that, the fun of the underworld and the gangsters and the gold diggers don't seem so funny or so fun anymore. Polly's underworld power brokers are being swept up into powerful federal investigations. Whether or not Governor Roosevelt was a client of Polly's, she was very much on his radar when he was running for president in 1932. So now Polly's hard-won notoriety is a liability. She finds herself swept up in the nets of these investigations. By 1931, now she's all over the newspapers, and that's when her mother finds out. The newspapers are calling her the female Al Capone, the first lady of the underworld. When the pressure goes too hot, she goes on the lam, first to New Jersey, hides out at the Treat Hotel in Newark, finally decides that's too hot, heads to Atlantic City, nope, too hot still, so she goes to Miami, and then to Havana. But she eventually is wily enough to come through this crisis relatively unscathed. And to her surprise, when the storms finally pass, all of this newspaper notoriety has actually only boosted her reputation among the cafe society types who think it's kind of chic to go to her house as a sort of underworld thing to do. She is powerful enough to escape prison until 1935, when she's swept up in the hunt for the Jewish gangster Dutch Schultz, who has been using her house as a hideout. Her trial causes yet another media frenzy, but in the end, she is sentenced to only 1 month in jail and even gets 5 days off for good behavior. When she gets out of jail, for the first time, she's really thinking maybe she should quit this business. And for good reason. After nearly 2 decades, her pride is shot, her nerves are on edge. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover has personally directed the FBI to try to find something on her. The new mayor, Fiorello LaGuardia, is determined to kick her out of New York and he wanted to send, frankly, all of the gamblers and bootleggers over to New Jersey. I can't say if that happened, but that was his plan, at least. Yet even when she rebuilt her savings and had enough money to retire, she hesitated. She knew that if she were out in the square world, she would be just another nobody, or maybe even worse. As she puts it, that as Pearl Adler, the reformed procuress and honest citizen, I was a social outcast. As Madame Polly, proprietress of New York's most opulent bordello, society came to me. So she continues on through the fat cat years of World War II, but by 1945, she is ready for an exit plan. Now, back in 1930, the boy, Abe Lastfogel, the famous boy genius who was one of the founders of the legendary William Morris Talent Agency, he had been urging her, you've got to write a memoir, you've got to write your autobiography. But at that time, that nothing could have been less appetizing, as she basically said that she might have been paid plenty for it, but that would have just about covered the cost of her funeral. But as the years went on, the idea of writing a book, like so many of her friends, started to appeal more and more to her. So many of the people she had known had turned the stories of gangsters and gold diggers and all those, the Prohibition era, into big movies and big novels. So why shouldn't she do that as well? So in 1945, she finally closes up her house and moves, as so many people do, to Los Angeles, California, where so many of her friends now lived. She goes back to high school and gets her high school diploma. She enrolls in junior college and gets her associate's degree, one of the proudest things she ever did. Finally, after 7 years and scores of rejection from every British publisher in New York City, she finally, in 1953, publishes her memoir called A House Is Not a Home. Now, most of you, I'm sure almost everyone here is, no one really is old enough to remember that, except perhaps as a very young kid. I have talked to older people who remember it like being on the top bookshelf at their parents' house. This book is an instant bestseller. It sells 2 million copies. It is huge. It's a scandal, but it's also a big cultural phenomenon. It makes her a genuine celebrity. It's a whitewash story. Of course, she does not tell even close to everything, but the backstairs chronicle of this early sexual revolution and the secret role that illicit sex played in politics and business, it was a big eye-opener. If we think of the 1950s, as they used to call it, as the age of conformity, she gives the age of conformity a big shock. On par, I would say, with her fellow authors of 1953, Alfred Kinsey, Simone de Beauvoir, and Hugh Hefner. As it happened, she became a very good friend of Dr. Kinsey's. She read the Kinsey Report on Women, and she also read Simone de Beauvoir's Second Sex, and approved heartily of both of them. Unfortunately, try as I might, I could find no comment that she might have left on the newly founded Playboy magazine. She was not without regrets, but when pressed to the end of her life, she was unrepentant. As she said, how could a girl from Shtetl with no money and no education become somebody who everyone knows and who had made so much of herself? In 1961, she sells the film rights to her memoir to a Hollywood producer. Unfortunately, she did not live to see the delicious irony of Joan Crawford, Barbara Stanwyck, Ethel Merman, and her dear friend Martha Ray all scrapping to get the role to play Manhattan's #1 Madam on the silver screen. I think she would have considered that perhaps one of her greatest accomplishments. In the end, the role went to Shelley Winters. You might remember her. She was a exhausted blonde Oscar winner at the time. You can watch the movie on YouTube for free, which is about what it's worth. It is not a good movie. It was in the 1960s, those early years were, not the time to be telling these kind of stories. But it has a few things going for it. The costume designer, the famous Edith Head, was nominated for an Oscar. Burt Bacharach wrote the title song, which became a top hit, sung by Dionne Warwick. And the actress Raquel Welch made her film debut as one of Polly's girls. When Polly died of lung cancer in 1962, long, respectful obituaries appeared in papers across the country. Almost every single paper ran her obituary. And I had translated, I don't speak Yiddish myself, but I had translated the articles about her in the Forward and other Yiddish papers, and it is quite remarkable, actually, how many of them say, well, listen, it's not great that she was a madam, it's not the best thing for the Jews, but you know what, you gotta admire her. She had some chutzpah, she had some real moxie. There was a pride there that you sometimes see in people even when they take the wrong path, but that they have really been strong and survivors. Now, these papers all hail her as a symbol of that long-forgotten decadent era. To her admirers, her brothels were playgrounds, intoxicating playgrounds, where the imagination was allowed to run free, unfettered by outside eyes and conventional rules. And her customers and her employees turned their experiences there into some of the songs and books and plays and all those daring new notions that make 20th century popular culture what it is. To her foes, Polly exerted a sinister influence with powerful men whose after-dark decision-making affected millions of Americans. And if we believe her claim that she procured women for FDR, her influence was even greater than her critics would have feared. But of course, publishing a best-selling book boosted her legacy. As one journalist observed, after all of Polly's corruption of both men and women, when she cashed in her chips, what did the obituaries read? Of course, author dies. Always good to read a bestseller. Now, while working on this book, I often thought of that great American novel of the Jazz Age, The Great Gatsby. Unfortunately, if Polly ever met F. Scott Fitzgerald or read Gatsby, she left no record of it. But I think that there are things that I think she would have had some practical questions about it. I don't think she would have thought much about Gatsby's, romance with Daisy. Most bootleggers that she knew were not so reverent towards women. She, I'm sure, would have had some questions about how do you throw a massive house party like that every weekend, and how do you deal with all that dirty laundry and dirty dishes? But I think the struggles of Jimmy Gatz, as he turned himself into Jay Gatsby, that heightened sensitivity to the promises of life, as Fitzgerald puts it, that I think she would have understood perfectly. So when Fitzgerald begins his novel in 1923, he is inspired very specifically by some of the bootleggers who are around Polly, and very specifically, he is inspired by a chance meeting he had with Arnold Rothstein, who he turns into the character of Myra Wolfsheim. But funny enough, they are not the ones who make Gatsby come to that vision, come to life. It is Polly who turns that fantasy of the wild party as a ladder to climb out of the gutter and into the upper rungs of society, a reality. So Polly, in the end, what struck me as so strange was that here is Polly. She wants to be remembered. She has become a figure of national fame, and yet nobody remembers her. But we remember her male criminal colleagues. We all know who Meyer Lansky is. We all know who Bugsy Siegel is. The American gangster has become, I mean, if you have watched The Sopranos, if you have watched The Godfather, if you've watched the millions of gangster movies and read the books, you know that the gangster has become a kind of American icon that we often use as a way to interpret our own understanding of America. And so when I was writing this, I was wondering, well, why? Why do you not see women in this position? Why do you not see the women who use sex as their weapon against a tough world, deified, or, you know, at least icon, turned into important figures the way you see these men do? And, you know, so I really think that some of it is because we have this double standard, that in fact, the real problem is that Polly, as somebody who really shows what it was like to be a woman struggling in a really tough world, shows how much that behind the fantasy of that glamorous era, behind the fantasy of the American dream, is how often the mechanics are just dreary and hard, and how often those flappers and those cafe society glamour girls are really just sad young women providing pleasure for other people. And so, as she herself would say, you know, it's one thing to be the symbol of a glamorous era, but it's harder still if your reality actually contradicts that glamour. So what I would say, maybe that has changed a little bit if you have lived through the Me Too era. Of course, if you read the newspapers, if you follow the many, many men who are getting their comeuppance, it could be that times are changing, that perhaps we are more interested in that intersection of sex and power, finding it more important to see that people of power are called to account for their desires when they're imposed on other people. I will say in closing, I guess that perhaps this might be the moment when Polly can come back into society, even if you will, into a respectable place like this, as the person she wanted to be, which was a strong woman who made her way in a really tough world. If I could close with the quote from Sunset Boulevard, Norma Desmond, "Maybe now Polly Adler is ready for her close-up." So thank you very much. Thank you for all of it. I hope it wasn't too much. And congratulations to the honorees.
Debbie, thank you so much. Very engaging and very enjoyable. And also, please, everybody, when you do leave today, please take a copy of the book so you get to read the whole story. So please take it right at the end. Just to introduce myself, my name is Larry Ryan. I am the proud past president of the JCC, and it's pretty amazing. I guess I'm the lucky guy that gets to be among all these amazing, wonderful women, so I'm the lucky person. But I really just want to say thank you to the amazing honorees this morning, Ruth and Grace and Becca. You really have been amazing. We've been having meetings for the last months, right, every Tuesday afternoon. And I'm going to miss those meetings because they've been fun, they've been entertaining, and truly they show that you all are three amazing leaders of our MetroWest community and the entire Jewish community. We are really so proud of you and so honored to be able to honor you today. And so just thank you again for all your time and all your effort. Thank you so much. And I also wanted to say thank you to everybody for being here. Thank you for really being here to support the honorees, and thank you most importantly to support the JCC. I know the theme of the day is why is the JCC? So just to give you my reason for the JCC, I grew up as a JCC baby. I actually grew up in Wilkesburg, Pennsylvania, and my family was part of the JCC forever. And the truth is, being part of the JCC culture is amazing. It doesn't make a difference if you're Orthodox, Conservative, Reform. It doesn't make a difference if you're a man or a woman. It doesn't make a difference if you're a senior or a child or a teenager. There is something for everybody at the JCC. And that's what I love about the JCC. There's something for everybody when you walk in the store you see all the ages, as we saw today, the children singing, the early childhood group singing, and of course to the senior programming. So it's really amazing to be able to be part of the JCC, and that's really why I love it. And I think about my memory always goes back to memory, Becca was talking about this as well, is that memory is my father, rest in peace, he went to the JCC every day of his life. He first was a swimmer, he was on the basketball team, he was on the swim team, all those great things because he grew up there. And then, when he became a senior, he went there every day to participate in senior programming, much like we have here at the MetroWest JCC. So take advantage of everything, be part of the JCC system, be part of the Jewish community. The community is amazing. We live in an amazing, amazing MetroWest community. I love living here, I love being part of here, be part of the JCC process. And I just want to take one moment just to say thank you to a few people. Thank you, of course, to Katie Strilson for bringing everything together. And also on top of that, getting that call from Christine that said, I'm sick, and now I need somebody to fill in for me today. So thank you again also, Katie, for filling in for Christine. Also, big thank you to our Belle Noah. She's our marketing person. Thank you so much for being there for us. And also Sarah Brothman, who you haven't seen, she used to be here. She came here at the end. And of course, I want to say a big thank you to Stuart Rayner. You know, this is our 5th anniversary of the women, and it was his idea really to do this. And I'm so happy that we've actually continued this tradition for all these years, and we should be continuing this tradition for many, many more years. Thank you, Stuart, for giving us that vision and direction. And also, I just want to say thank you to 3 very special women, Sharon Sidon, Joyce Goldstein, and Karen Ford. These 3 women, they're always there for every program of our JCC. There is never a program they're not involved in, either from a fundraising perspective or attendance perspective, and just being there to be supportive. So thank you very, very much. And also, all I can say now is get ready for next year's 6th anniversary. But also, I hope to see you through the halls and walls of the JCC here. Please participate. There'll be lots more programming coming this coming year now that we pray that COVID is almost behind us. And see you soon. So be well. Thank you for being here. Shabbat shalom.
Really nice.
It was a great program.